Today, I have a special guest who is also one of my presenters at the Upper Elementary Simplified conference coming up in just a few weeks. Helena Hains from The Present Teacher is here with me today to talk about how you can start prepping over the summer to make back to school time as smooth and low stress as possible. And the best part is that she teaches how to prep without taking your whole summer break to do it. Stay tuned. Welcome to Upper Elementary Simplified, the podcast where busy and overwhelmed teachers find thoughtful ideas to get students engaged in meaningful learning experiences. Hi, I'm Danna Rodebush, former fifth grade classroom teacher and founder of Teacher Tech Studio. I'm here to share practical tips and strategies that will help you grow as an educator. If you are a tired upper elementary teacher searching for ways to cut down your planning time while boosting student engagement, you are in the right spot. Are you ready? Let's simplify. Helena holds a degree in elementary education and English as a second language. She is a first year and new teacher coach who empowers first year teachers to mindfully thrive inside and out of the classroom through teacher wellness, classroom management, and time management. She holds nearly 10 years of experience in K 2 classrooms. As a new teacher coach, Helena believes that mental and emotional health needs to come first in order to see success in the education world and beyond. During her first year of teaching, she reached burnout and was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. With a desire to eliminate the stigma around mental health for teachers in the online space, she shared her journey with her online community and created the Present Teacher. Since then, Helena has presented at a variety of summits, conferences, and podcasts about how new teachers can overcome and prevent teacher burnout with proper time management, classroom management, and teacher wellness. Helena is on a mission to help all new teachers have a long, fulfilling career they love and can thrive in the classroom and in life. Let's welcome Helena to the show. Helena, welcome to the show today. Please tell my audience a little bit about you and how you serve the education community.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So, my name's Helena. I'm the creator of The Present Teacher. I graduated with my master's in elementary education in 2018, and I was super excited to be a teacher. I had always wanted to start teaching, but when I started my first year of teaching, I quickly realized how much there was to teaching despite going through a year of student teaching and, like I said, getting my master's degree. That by December of my first year, I was contemplating quitting, which, if you know me, I'm very determined and I'm very driven. So that was very hard for me to deal with and to come to terms with. In February, I went to counseling, I got help. I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression. And at the end of the year, I had to make a decision of, am I going to continue on with teaching or do I need to step out? And I am an all or nothing kind of gal. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to do my best and I am going to put my all into teaching. So I quickly started to realize that systems in the classroom were my friend and they really helped me create an easy school year. I was then able to go from being that teacher who was the first person in the parking lot to the last one leaving to now I was that teacher that was leaving at contract time. I was having fun with teaching. I didn't feel like I was chasing a to-do list. I was showing up for my students and I was seeing that impact after I made that transition that I had always wanted. And around this time, this is when COVID happened, and I realized that there were a lot of new teachers entering the field, and I wanted to share what systems I was using in the classroom to make the school year a success, especially since 1 in 4 teachers leave the profession in their first 5 years. So I started The Present Teacher. I have my own podcast, I have my own YouTube channel, and my goal is to help first and new year teachers set themselves up for success from everything from classroom management to setting up their classroom to planning ahead so they can go on vacations mid-year guilt-free so they can show up and be the teacher that they know that they were meant to be. So that's why I started this, and I have absolutely loved serving my community online.
Oh my goodness. I love that. I love that. So I'm super excited for all of the listeners today because I know without a doubt there is someone out there that is struggling, with that just overwhelm and stress. That's what happens as a teacher. And so I'm super excited to hear from you today about how teachers can begin prepping over the summer because we're here at the end of the school year. And so that's going to take a little bit of that stress and overwhelm off of their shoulders during the back to school season. So let's start out by talking about what your own experience has been with prepping over the summer in your first years as a teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, when I first started teaching, like I said, I was quickly burned out, and a lot of that had to do with how I set up my school year. I'm assuming, like most first year teachers, the first thing I did when I got my job was I went to Pinterest and I started reading all the blogs, all the YouTube videos about what to expect in my grade level, how to set up for the classroom. And I focused a lot on the aesthetics of my classroom instead of everything else. So that entire summer, I went in, I swear, every day, 9 to 5 on the weekdays. And I was working on setting up my classroom to be super cute. But when school started approaching, I quickly realized that that time that they gave teachers at the beginning of the year wasn't really to set up their classroom. It was actually to meet other teachers, to start talking about, curriculum for the upcoming year. And I hadn't started any of that. I had solely focused on making my classroom look cute, setting up the different areas. And so when my students started, I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what I was supposed to be teaching. I felt behind before I even started. I didn't have a classroom management plan in place. And I hadn't thought about, okay, when I get my resources, how am I going to file them away? All of that kind of went to the back burner. And even in my second year, I thought, okay, I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to kind of pivot a little bit. And so I started focusing a little more on classroom management, but it wasn't until my third year that I finally started to think, okay, aesthetics isn't everything. While yes, I love having a cute classroom. In fact, I have a Harry Potter second grade classroom. There is a point where you need to start focusing on classroom management, on communicating with your families, on planning the first week or two ahead. That way, when back to school starts, you can breathe and enjoy it instead of being frustrated or overwhelmed by all of the things you have to do when you start out.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. And I know that there are some teachers out there for sure that are guilty of everything you just said. I know my first year I spent a lot of time making that cute classroom because I mean that's part of the fun, but you're exactly right. We have to focus on other aspects of teaching than just making a cute classroom. I love that you said that. So, you probably touched on this a little bit, but are there some other mistakes that you have seen teachers make as they are trying to prep over the summer?
Yeah, the main one that we talked about, like you said earlier, is when it comes to making their classroom look cute, is they focus on that instead of focusing evenly on other aspects. Another thing is teachers feel obligated to set up their classroom complete from day one, when the truth is, I like it's short-term thinking versus long-term thinking. You don't have to have everything bought and set up from day one. You can start adding to it slowly. So one thing I felt extremely guilty on was as an elementary teacher, I felt like I had to have an amazing classroom library. But the truth was, I didn't have the money for that. But here I was trying to go and bargain shop all summer for these books. And the truth is, if you just add to it slowly, along with other decor and other materials you want to use in your classroom, that's way more sustainable than trying to set everything up in a single summer. So that's another big mistake I see. The third mistake I often see also is teachers don't often think about how am I going to communicate with families? I think that's something that, oh, parent night is this week. I should probably start thinking about that. But It's honestly something that you can start way before then, and you can also start setting up a positive way to communicate with your families from week one. One way I like to do this is I like to do love calls, what I call in the primary grades, where I give a positive call home within the first month of school to show my families that I am going to have a positive, open relationship with them, and I'm going to communicate with them not only for when something is going wrong per se in the classroom or I need their help with something, but also to point out the positive. So that's another common mistake I see with teachers when they first start setting up their classroom. And then again, classroom management. Oftentimes, you don't know how to start your classroom management from day one. So you start throwing things together once your kids are in front of you. But the truth is, that's something you should be starting weeks, if not months in advance. Start thinking about that now. That way, when your students come in, you can be intentional about how you're managing your classroom.
Absolutely, 100% agree. So, I would love it if you would give the listeners some tips on how to prep during the summer without working all summer and taking up the entire quote unquote break to do it.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm an avid traveler. I don't know about you. I've been to Costa Rica, I've been to Italy. And so one thing I really like to do is to minimize the amount of time I'm spending over the summer for the school year. So I actually created a system where it's a 4-week system to setting up your classroom for success. And you can even start this right now towards the end of the year. But the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to think of the flow of your classroom. So think about this is the classroom design piece. So that's going to be week one. Think about the different areas you have in your classroom and how those are going to play well together, or maybe you need to separate them. So, for example, my first year of teaching, I had the lineup area next to my small group table, which was fine until I had a student leave early or come in late, in which case that area would then disrupt my students who I was pulling for small groups. So, taking some time to think about the different areas in your classroom and which areas you want to put next to each other and being intentional with that. I like to think of the flow of the classroom kind of like a river. Your kids are going to go where there's the least resistance. So, being more intentional which areas you put next to each other. So that's going to be week one. Week two is going to be your classroom organizing. So that's where you're going to think of the flow of your classroom in regards to your resources and your data. So, in order to set this up, I think to myself, if I were to print off a resource, whether it's for my curriculum or whether it's from TBT, if I print something off, what are the different touch points I'm going to take with that one resource until I file it away? So for me, that looked like once I print enough copies for the week, and then I create a master. Then I had a hanging filing cabinet or a hanging filing folder right by my door, set up by days of the week so I could put it there. And then I put my master copy in my filing cabinet, and I pre-made folders with the different subjects and skills my students were going to cover that year. That way, in the middle of the school year, I'm not sitting there trying to make vanilla folders for my different resources I'm going to create. I already have that in place. So being more intentional with how you're going to set up your classroom and how you're going to organize your classroom is going to be really, really important. So that's the second week that I teach my teachers or show my teachers to do. The third week that I recommend doing is your classroom management. We talked about this earlier, but how do you want to manage your classroom? And one of the biggest things I recommend people reflect on is their values. What kind of teacher do you want to be? And a lot of that plays into how you manage your classroom. But during this time, I recommend looking at what are my rules that I'm setting up for my classroom? I personally like to set up I do rules or I am or I can rules. This is more empowering instead of telling students what they can and cannot do. Instead, it's modeling what they should be doing in the classroom and what success looks like. So that's one of the things that I do for my classroom management. And the next thing is I list out all the procedures I want to teach during the school year. And procedures are the things that you want your students to, how you want them to interact with each other or throughout the room. So this could be lining up, this could be packing up, this could be coming in the morning, this could be getting a pencil. All those little things are procedures and being intentional about when you teach those procedures are really important. So I recommend teaching anywhere from 3 to 5 procedures a week. So I think, what are the first 3 to 5 procedures I want to teach during week one? And I actually have a spreadsheet where I map that out and I'm like, okay, this week, these are the skills and the procedures I'm going to model to my students on what that looks like. So that's during week three. I lay out my classroom management plan. And then in week four, this is the planning time. So this is where I'm going to plan out how am I going to communicate with my families and what am I teaching during those first 2 weeks of school. That way, when I come in, everything's planned, prepped, and ready to go. I like to do a themed week. So this is very common in elementary school, specifically with primary grades, but I know upper grades do it too. But where you pick a book theme for the week and then you match all the activities to match that book. So for me, that has been anywhere from the kissing hand is a common one. That was common for me in kindergarten. And then another one I like to do is how full is your bucket? That's a good one for upper elementary kids. But using those books to help you plan out the week and activities and give you the opportunity to model those procedures we talked about in week three. So that's my step by step on how I set up during the school year or during the summer. So I'm not doing it the entire summer. It's done in half the amount of my summertime, and I can enjoy the other 4 weeks going to Costa Rica or going to Cancun like I did last summer.
Oh my goodness, I love that. I love how detailed it is. I love your whole framework, and I wish that I would have been able to get my mind, to do that whenever I was in the classroom because there were summers when I probably took off maybe a week or 2 just and did no work during that time. So I love how you have it so organized and systematic. That is awesome. So are there some specific things that teachers should focus on over the summer to get ahead for the school year?
So, the specific things other than the ones I talked about is thinking about the flow of the classroom. That would be the first thing that I recommend is looking at your areas and being like, okay, these areas worked well together, those areas didn't. And then that classroom management plan, because I know, especially right now, you're starting to notice behaviors and things that did not work well. So, taking some space to reflect on what went well this year with my classroom management, what didn't go well, and what can I change. And so, really focusing on that over the summer. And then I personally like to plan ahead. So, when I'm sitting, by the pool, I can look at my scope and sequence or what I'm teaching, and I can start those lesson plans ahead of time. So, essentially, while yes, setting up for the classroom and making the aesthetics look amazing is a good idea, it's also important to focus on the other things. And all of this is stuff you can do even right now to set you up for next year. So if you notice, certain areas that aren't working together, take note of that. If you notice some, classroom management things you want to shift, take note of that as well. And then maybe you're organizing how you file stuff away. Maybe you can start setting that up for next year. I like to file my resources by subject because I am an elementary teacher. So that looks like, math, reading, science, social studies, all that jazz. And then I break it down by skill or by Common Core standard. So then I have those file folders set up ready to go for next year. Right now, if I didn't have it in place, that way when I start the new year, I already have that set up. And I do the same thing with whether it's my Google Drive or my desktop for my school. I set file folders for the same thing. So those are set up ready to go. And that's something you can do even today to set up for next year is you can set those up now. That way when you start next year, that system's already in place.
Ooh, I love that. So, we've talked a little bit about classroom management, but as part of the teacher's summer prep, you've kind of mentioned that they may want to think about changing up or revamping their classroom management plan. So, what would you say to a teacher specifically who is wanting to make some changes, and what does that typically look like?
Absolutely. So this was something that I had to do a hard heart to heart reflection on. And for me, I noticed that my kids were always out of their seats. They were always talking when I was talking. And I'm thinking, after, 2 years of trying to get them to change, I started to think, okay, maybe it's how I'm communicating with them. And what I found is there was a lot of underlying reasons as to why my students were acting that way that I didn't realize. So, for example, my students were constantly out of their seat. Well, I would look at my schedule and I would have them sit as kindergartners for 30 to 40 minutes at a time because that's what the curriculum said. And I'm thinking, okay, I need to be more intentional. I wonder if movement is the reason why my students aren't listening or being able to focus. So I would incorporate more movement breaks throughout the day. So listing out what you're noticing in the classroom and then starting to be like a detective and to find those underlying reasons. For example, another reason, I had a lot of students who were messing around during library, and I couldn't figure out, in our reading section during our centers or when they were independently reading in the library. And it was because it was set up right next to the lineup area where kids would go back and get their backpacks, and that was disrupting each other. So the next year I moved it away from that area. So that way that wasn't as disrupting. So thinking about what am I seeing in the classroom and then how can I change that? One of the biggest questions I get as a first year teacher coach or a new teacher coach is, how do you teach procedures? And this was something I was doing wrong. I would tell my students, line up, and they would line up, but they would do it very loud. They wouldn't follow my expectations. So then I realized I wasn't actually being thorough. So I follow this different formula or system that I use for teaching procedures. And that's first is I introduce what they're going to do. And then I model it. I physically get up and show them what it looks like and sounds like. And we have an open discussion. What does it look like and sound like that I just did? And we'll discuss it. And then I'll model the wrong way. And we'll talk about, what does it not look like and sound like? And then this is the part that I feel like a lot of teachers miss is, why is it important? Why are we doing this? Because you need to have that buy-in with your students, because students want to make you proud. They want to follow expectations, but oftentimes we just aren't being clear enough unintentionally. So then if you tell them why it's important, it's easier for them to remember, oh, we use walking feet when we go in line because we don't want to trip, hurt ourselves, hurt our friends, disrupt the class, disrupt the person walking or, working. So we do the why, and then I have them practice. And I've always been labeled as a high engaging teacher. I'm very bubbly, even though I'm an introvert with adults. I'm very bubbly. I'm out there. I'm fun. I love playing games. But I feel like there's this misconception that you have to be no smiling until December. And then there's the super fun teacher who has no classroom management skills. But the truth is, you can do both. It's having high expectations on what the classroom should look like and sound like, and practicing that so that you can have the space to be fun and engaging and play the games. So that's one thing I really had to focus on. But looking at, are my rules serving me? Do I feel like I can ask my students and they know what it is, and I feel like it's the foundation of my classroom? Are my procedures clear? Can my students show me what it looks like and sounds like? And the whole goal of classroom management is you want to be able to step out and have your classroom run without you doing anything. If you can go out into the hallway and have a conversation with another teacher without them interrupting you, then that's a good indicator that you have strong classroom management in place. So having those, and then third is clear consequences. Are you giving your students 10 warnings before they move on? Or are you being clear that the first time I have to talk to you, this is what's going to happen. The second time, this is what's going to happen. And the third time, this is what's going to happen. You're not giving them 10 to 20 warnings. You're being consistent with what you say is going to happen each time they are not following your expectations.
I love that. And something that you said of as far as teaching them the why. I really, really like that because I'm always really big about that, in whatever the case may be, whether it's with students or even if it's with my own kids, why do we do this? Why do you think it's that way? And I think that's super important when it comes to teaching procedures, like you said. So I think this kind of leads into my next question because as teachers, we should always be in the practice of reflecting to better our instruction and our strategies. So, how do you go about reflecting on the past year to get better in the upcoming year?
Yeah, such a great question. And I love that you mentioned the why because I was actually a why kid. I was always asking why we do things, not because I was trying to be, facetious, but because I wanted to know why things work so I could better remember them. So I
I
completely
love
agree with
that.
you that that's important. Yeah. So, as far as reflecting, I take those four areas I talked about earlier and I reflect on them. So, the first thing I focus on is by design. I ask myself what went well, and then I journal on it or write it down. What didn't go well, and then what can I change, pivot, or take out? And I do that with each of the areas. So, after I do my design, I look at organizing. What went well, what didn't go well, what can I change for next year? And then the same with planning and the same with classroom management. And then from there, I take 3 to 4 or 1 to 3 goals for the school year. So maybe this year or this month or the first quarter, I'm really going to focus on my classroom management because I know I didn't start off strong last year with that. So then I will go and I will follow all the amazing teachers online that are strong in classroom management. I'll be researching, I'll be attending summits like the one we're talking about coming up. And learning all I can about that. And I will focus on that until I feel like, okay, I have a good grasp on that. I'm ready to move on to the next goal. So, breaking down your school year like that is a lot more manageable, I feel, than trying to be better at everything from day one. Taking a focus for anywhere from 1 to 3 months and focusing on that until you feel like you're confident with that, and then moving on to the next thing. And then, one thing I like to reflect on as well is how did I feel at the end of most days? Because one thing I'm really passionate about, and the whole reason I do this is because teacher wellness is extremely important. And then asking yourself, well, why is that? Why am I mostly happy, or what's causing me the most stress? And how can I pivot that next year? Because the truth is, it is possible to love teaching. I know on social media, there's a lot of hate about or stress and overwhelm, but I mean, there are a ton of teachers online who have so much space and love and freedom that they're starting businesses on the side. They're hosting summits on the side. And if it's possible for us, it's possible for you too. So, taking that personal wellness piece as well and asking yourself, how can I make next year better for me? Because when you can show up happy, more energized for your students, you're going to enjoy the career long term. You're going to stay long term, but it's going to be a much more filling and loving and I just rewarding career all around.
Absolutely. I love that. So, I know you've talked about a lot of different things that teachers can do during the summer, but if you could give teachers one piece of advice right now, here at the end of the school year, as they begin to think about taking some time this summer to get ready for next school year, what would that advice be?
The first thing I would say is because I work with teachers, because I'm a teacher, I know one of the first things you're going to want to do is to jump in and to fix everything but my piece of recommendation or advice would be to take a break, to take space, because it is easy to work your entire summer or to jump right in and then feel exhausted before the school year even starts. So giving yourself, the break during the summer that you can to just be and celebrate, because I know we talked a lot about how you can continue to grow, but it's also important to celebrate your wins. What did you do well? What did you grow on? What are you proud on that you did this school year? And to take that time, because in the past, I've gone straight from working the school year to jumping in and trying to revamp for the next year. And by that first day of school, I was exhausted and I was a disservice for my students and it was a disservice for me. So taking that break is extremely important because you're going to come back that much stronger. And then for the last little bit of the school year, my piece of advice for that is to enjoy that time with your babies, because I remember when my kindergartners were graduating my first year of teaching, when they graduated, I was bursting into tears not because I was proud, but because I felt like I had missed it. I felt like I had blinked and I had missed the growth because I was so caught up in trying to make everything better. So, giving yourself permission to just show up today and enjoy those moments with your kids because you're going to miss them next year. Even I know right now they're probably driving you crazy and you're ready for a break, but you're going to miss them. So, enjoying the moments now and then giving yourself permission to take the break you deserve over the summer.
Absolutely. That's great advice. I 100% agree. So I know that you have a free guide for new teachers that I'm going to be linking in the show notes. Would you like to tell the listeners a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So, the Ultimate Classroom Setup Guide is a guide I created that answers the top 10 questions I get from new teachers about setting up for the new school year. And all of these strategies can be used from anywhere from pre K all the way to high school. And so it has answers questions like, how do I set up my classroom library, or how do I save money setting up my classroom? What should I focus on for classroom management? When should I be contacting families? What should I be doing for parent night? All those things I've wrapped up into a free guide that you can download and use because I noticed over the summer when I first started teaching, I was using a lot of my time researching. So I thought if I could compile all the information in one place, it would save teachers a lot of time. So I could spend more time by the pool, celebrating with their families and resting and traveling like I like to do. So if you would like to download that, please feel free to. And then if you have any questions that aren't answered in that guide, feel free to reach out and I'm happy to help or point you to a resource or an answer or someone who has an answer for you.
Awesome. That sounds great. So, like I said, that will be in the show notes if you are interested and you can go and check that out. So, Helena, please go ahead and tell my audience where they can find you if they want to connect with you.
Absolutely. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. This has been such a pleasure. And first place you can join me is actually in the summit coming up soon. So I'm sure you'll be hearing more about that. So make sure to tune in, I'm sure, to this podcast or, the social medias everywhere. But you can find me at The Present Teacher. I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, Pinterest. I have my own YouTube channel, The Present Teacher. And then I also have my own podcast channel called The Present Teacher Podcast. And come hang out, send me a DM if you have any questions. I'm always happy to help new teachers. So,
Awesome. I love that. And Helena, thank you again so much for being here. I have really enjoyed hearing from you. And I know the listeners are going to get a lot out of this conversation.
thank you so much.
Thank you for listening this week. And I hope that you will join me next week, same time, same place. Have a great week. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Upper Elementary Simplified. I hope you are able to take away something useful that will help you grow as a teacher. I do have a quick favor to ask before you go. If you are enjoying the podcast, please let me know by leaving me a review. It really does make a difference because reviews impact search results, which helps me to expand my reach to other educators. Plus, I love to read my listeners' comments. Until next time, keep life simple.